when anybody is learning React, Angular, Vue, like technologies, they ask a question like, so will you teach Ajax here? If anybody asked the question like, will you teach Ajax? That means they don't know these technologies properly, because so they doesn't need to use Ajax explicitly. Internally, everywhere Ajax is there. Every method works in an Ajax asynchronously only. And sometimes people think that Ajax means fetching data from API. Ajax is not fetching data from API. Loading any file into the page, loading any content into the page. It returns JSON array, JSON objects. Our shopping website related API returning JSON array. We are fetching it and we are using it. So we can access the API and interact with the API. Some people think that Ajax is used for APIs only. No, Ajax is used for general methods also. That's what we have learned earlier. I showed you we can access the page and display without using iframes like concept. Already we discussed that. That is the general approach of working with services Ajax. Now in advanced technologies, this becomes more easy. We don't need to write much lengthy logics. Ready-made functions are present. By using those functions, we can easily handle the functionality. We can easily manage the functionality. So that is generally the concept of working with Ajax in jQuery. So once you know this, you can use with your own APIs now. But to create your own API, you must know server-side technologies. That means now we need to go into backend development. Once we know how to create our own API, then we can consume in various React, Angular. I will show you how to interact with them. But before going into the backend development, before entering into the backend development, one more topic we will see, that is how we can work with Sass. So how do we deal with Sass? Because it is related to CSS, but it is easy to understand and use if you are good with general JavaScript and jQuery. Because programming, if you are good with programming, Sass is easy. That is the reason I waited for us to finish the JavaScript jQuery, then we can see Sass. It's very simple now. Because without knowing variables, data types, operators, statements, if conditions, iterations, you cannot use this Sass. And less is not much used, so it's Sass is better than less. That's the reason we are going to use this Sass. Even our Bootstrap is designed in Sass. What is the concept of Sass is actually syntactically awesome style sheet. Awesome style sheet. Syntactically awesome style sheet. That is the full form. Actually, Sass is a CSS preprocessor. CSS preprocessor. That means, so the advantage is it makes CSS reusable. reusable, and maintainable. So reusability, maintainability. That means maintainability is nothing but extensibility. This is improved with the SaaS. So in real world development, some projects directly use CSS. Remember, browser can understand CSS only. But for a developer, writing CSS is very lengthy. So reusability problems are there. That is the reason we can use SaaS. SaaS will be working as a programming language for you. What is the advantage of this programming language is it is making your CSS code more simplified so that it is easy to implement and use anywhere. For example, suppose we written some border effects, and these border effects we written as a class, and these border effects already we have some container. In the container is having some effects. That means container is trying to use font effects. Container is trying to use font styles. So along with that, it needs these border effects. Then actually in the container, we have to write them again. Instead of doing that, now what we can do is we can reuse that inside the container. We can access and use the border effects inside the container. Border effects inside the container. We can access and use it inside it. That is the speciality. So it will reduce the effort of reusabilities concerns. That means generally if we have to rewrite, now we don't need to rewrite, we can simply reuse. It supports variables, data types, operators, statements, all these it will support. You haven't seen till now CSS variables. Sometimes people ask, like, sir, in CSS, can we have variables? CSS will not have variables. In CSS, we will not have variables, data types, operators, statements. But CSS preprocessor can have. So generally what happens is, I will show you the mechanism. What happens is, so we write the CSS, that means we write in SAS. As a developer, the convenient method for us is to write in SAS. By using SAS, we can write. So by using SAS, we are writing. That means it provides an easy technique for developers so that within less lines, he can handle the functionality. But browser cannot understand. SAS. Browser can understand only CSS. Then what we have to do, this SAS need to be transcompiled. It need to be transcompiled. it need to be transcompiled. Transcompiled into CSS. That means it is translated into CSS. This CSS will be used by browser. That means finally browser is using CSS. So we cannot understand directly SAS. Browser cannot understand. For a developer, CSS is always a pain. Lot of content we have to write. That's the reason for developer SAS and for browser CSS. It will be translated into CSS. You see already you are using Bootstrap. When you observe your Bootstrap code, you see, observe the Bootstrap library. Go to Node Modules and see. In Node Modules Bootstrap, you will find SCSS folder. SCSS folder. In SCSS folder, you see all the SCSS files are present. Bootstrap SCSS file is there. This Bootstrap SCSS file is written like this. It is written like this. Functions, variables, importing, everything. I will explain this code. That means it is importing from various libraries and using. Importing from various libraries and using and handling it. Actually, this is importing from this root. You can observe it is importing from navbars, cards, accordion. You see separate card SCSS is there. In that they have written the card related logic in some programming style that I will explain. Now this is translated into it. See, it is having 215 lines code. That is translated into CSS. You go to Bootstrap dist CSS. In the Bootstrap CSS, you see these are all the Bootstrap CSS files. And actually, so in Bootstrap, this is distribution folder. This is dist. So generally, the Bootstrap original file you saw, SCSS file, it is having only 53 lines code. I ignored comments also. Less than if you remove those comments also, then it will be less. See, approximately 52 lines code is there. Now, when I go to the Bootstrap CSS original file, you can see that this is now converted into CSS and it is having almost 10,000 lines code. That means, so that is translated and it finally comes with 10,000 lines of code. It is giving all the 10,000 lines of code and displaying. So how it translates like that? So how we developers can write in a simple way and use that simple way for presentation. Here Bootstrap is also using SAS only. Now we are going to learn how to write this, how to use the SAS by ourselves. So that once you know how to use SAS, then it is easy for writing CSS. And that you can convert and give to our application. So sometimes projects will use directly CSS. Sometimes projects will use SAS. And of course, they ask you to design in SAS, that finally you have to convert into CSS and give it to application. So how to use this? Let's see one example, means how we can handle that. What are the abilities? For that, first you have to install SAS in your project. So open the terminal in your project. You have to run the command npm install. So the SAS library you have to install. So SAS library you need in various projects. If you need in various projects, better use -g. SAS -g is nothing but it will install globally so that you can use in other projects also. Currently it is working, it will be in this folder, full stack 4pm. If I don't use -g, it will run only in this project. It will install that only for this project. But if you give -g, it will install for entire machine. So that in your computer, in any project you can use. In Angular projects, React projects, JavaScript projects, anywhere you can use it. So better install globally, enter. This will download and install the SAS library for you on your computer. So SAS is successfully installed. Once SAS is successfully installed on your computer, now it's ready. You can use in any project. So what we will do now, we will create a new folder in the project, and the folder name we will give as SAS. In that, we need to create a SAS file. SAS files will have the extension .scss. SAS files will have extension .scss, and they will be converted into CSS. CSS files will be normal, converted into normal. That's how we need to manage it. So first, how to write SAS, how it is convenient for us, how to convert into CSS. See, let's see. First, we will add a new file. Add a new file. For example, first we will take a new page. Okay, let's create a page in the public folder. I will add a new folder, new file, some demo.sample.html. Okay, here we have some options. You see, I'm writing here doc type, HTML, head, title, so SAS examples, and body. In the body, we have a div. Okay, div. In the div, we have a class container. In the container, we have a heading. Heading will have some SAS examples. So, and here SAS. Okay, and inside that we have a paragraph. Now I want to apply some text. It is a CSS preprocessor. Okay. Now I want to write some effect, different effects. One effect for container, one effect for heading in container, one effect for paragraph. They should have different appearance. So for example, so we have this code. I will show you clearly now. So this is the code, HTML code. Now I need to write effects for container. Generally, how to write in the style? So we write like this. First for container, dot container, and what effects you want. For container, I want some background color, some red, something color, some just background color red. Okay. Now I want to apply effect for, I want to write effect for heading inside container. For heading, red color. For paragraph, blue color. How to apply for heading in container? Because headings can be somewhere else also. So I don't want to apply to every heading. I want to apply to heading only inside container. Then how to write in styles? What is the syntax to write for heading in container? How to write the selector? Can you tell? How to write the selector for heading in container? Selector, how do you write? Good. We will write container space heading. Am I right? Yeah, good. Space heading, a comma heading, space heading, right? We know the difference between space, comma, and greater than, right? We discussed the difference between them in the selectors. CSS selectors, we learned about them. So space heading, okay. That means I have to write again here, dot container, heading 2. So the color is red, the color is some white. Okay. Now I want to write for paragraph. Then again I have to write container, paragraph, what effects we want. What do you say? Because that is paragraph is a different color. We have to write like this. Am I right? Is there any other shortcut? Is there any other shortcut, or this is the only way we have in CSS generally? Is there any other shortcut to write different effects for them? Already you learned CSS now. Tell me, is there any other effect now? Is there any other effect? Means other way of writing this. Is there any another way of writing this? I am asking the code. I am not asking inline outline. I am saying that I want these effects. Is there any shortcut of this? Instead of writing so many lines, is there any another shortcut? So there is no shortcut. This is only the way we have to write. But see now in Sass how I can write. Now let's add a Sass file. In the Sass folder, I will add a new file. I have created a Sass folder. In the Sass folder, add a new file, effects.scss. Effects.scss. This is Sass. Here, how do we write? Very simple. First, dot container. Okay. What effects you want? I want the effect background color. So background color, some I given as red. Okay. Good. Inside this container, you have a heading. Inside the container, you have a heading. Directly you can write like this. Inside it, heading. This color must be white. And inside that container, you have paragraph. It should have color as yellow. That's it. It's so simple. Now, when you write this, that means what is advantage of SAS? You can write the effects in the same hierarchy how they are present. That is very good. This is not possible in CSS. So you can write the effects in the same hierarchy how they are available in page. So now see what happens. So for the container, suppose I am giving height, you can give more effects, suppose 300 pixels. So for the container, I am using border as 2 pixels solid. So solid, some black like this. I given some padding as some 5 pixel padding. We given these options. Now you see, when I save this, you cannot use this directly in the page. Page will not allow. You can have only CSS files. So this is for a developer. So developers will use this. This is for developer. Now what developer will do? He will convert this into CSS. How? We have to go to the folder where it is stored, where that file is stored. So open that SAS folder, right click on SAS folder, open in integrated terminal, select that. Open in integrated terminal. It will open that location in terminal. Otherwise, you can go to your project location. Here you know the general commands. CD SAS. It will change into that folder. Here you have to run a command. The command is nothing but simple. SAS compiler. SASS. SAS. It is the SAS compiler. SASS is the SAS compiler. That is the compiler name. SAS, you have to tell which file you want to compile. File name. File name is effects.scss. Okay. Into which file you want to convert. You can give a different name also. I will give effects.css. That means there is no effects.css. It will create this file. It will convert all your SAS code into that CSS. And it will give to you. Now hit enter. Now it is compiled successfully. Once it is compiled successfully, observe in the SAS folder, 2 files are created. One is effects.css, effects.css.map. That map file is used to understand which version of CSS, SCSS it is. Version means nothing but generally what happens is it compiled first time? Is it compiled second time? Is it updated recently? Metadata, all such information is present. It is used to understand in which version it is used, so that in future we need it for migration from one version to another version. If you want to know in which version of SAS it is written, we need this map file actually. But see, the map file contains some information like this. Its version number and everything it will display. Metadata, it contains the metadata. So, and the output file is effects.css. I go to effects.css file now. Effects.css file, select it and see, it is as expected. So you see, this is how we write. But now we are not writing like this. We are writing in a more simple way. This is more simple way. It's not reducing the code. It is not reducing the code. It is reducing the logical approach towards CSS. That makes more better. Logical approach of CSS will be very easy for developer. Not only that, it will be very easy for reusability, maintainability. It will be very easy. So that means I have to write like this actually. Already I showed you that we need to write like that. Already we discussed that. We need to write like that. Container heading, container paragraph. But now it is written in this hierarchy. That means how the elements are present in the page. In the same order you can write. That's very good, easy. But it will translate. This is not understandable to browser. Browser cannot understand this mechanism. That's the reason we have to translate that. And we need to provide. Now this is provided to your page. So let's go to the sample page. In sample page, which one we have to link? Remember, after every modification, you have to compile again. After every modification, you have to compile again. That means you've done some changes in a CSS file. You have to compile by using this command again. Then only the updates will be happening. Now here you know how to link. So here we have to link relation is equal to style sheet. And the link href is equal to, so that is from node modules, not node modules. It is present in separate folder, SAS, in the SAS effects.css. This is what we have to link. And now see, when I run this page, automatically it is going to apply that effect. It is accessing that and it is using it. So this is the advantage of SAS. So it makes your hierarchy of CSS very simplified. Not only hierarchy. Now the effects. So and a lot of conditional renderings we can manage because it supports all the programming features. It supports variables. It supports data types. Variables we know. Generally, same JavaScript variables. Colors. JavaScript variables, same like variables. But here in SAS, variables are declared by using, what is a variable? No need to explain. Variables are declared by using dollar variable name. You will not have keywords like var, let and all. Dollar and variable name. And into that, you can define a value. What is the value into the variable you want to store? Dollar variable name. So actually, the value you want to store in a variable must be defined as an object type. What colon you have to use, not equal. So what value you want to store inside it, we need to configure. Variable name and value. Now, if you want to access the variable anywhere, just you have to define that variable name. So the variable name you have to access. You can store any effect. For example, suppose I'm accessing, I'm defining some background color. Background color, so RGBA. RGBA, that is background color, RGBA. So red is 210, green is 200, and blue is 100, like this. And alpha is 0.6, that is alpha. Now I want this shade for some paragraph somewhere else. I want that shade for some paragraph for somewhere else. So that means currently you are giving you have that background. So this is container. Suppose I have another div. And here we have some heading variables, and we for this paragraph background color. So that means data. For this paragraph, I want to use that color. So if you want to, for that paragraph, then usually what you have to do, so you need to write that again. If I want the same for this paragraph also color, so then you have to write again. But see now what I can do is, if this color shade is regularly required, then I can cut it above. I can declare a variable dollar back shade. That is the variable name, colon. In that we can store this value. And a container background color, you can access that variable back shade. That's it. Dollar, that variable name. So outside the container, we have paragraph. For paragraph, I want to apply that back shade. That means background color. I will just access the back shade. No need to write. Now, what is the specialty here? You compile it again. You have to compile again. SAS effects.scss and effects.css. You compile again and refresh. You can see it is applied for both of them. And what is the specialty is, you know, if I change the variable here, if I change the variable, and we can change the variable here. So I changed the color shade. If I change the variable and apply, it is affected and compile again and compile again. And it is affected everywhere. That's good. We can apply everywhere. We can configure everywhere the same effect. That means the advantage is we can reuse it. You can store any lengthy value, because sometimes our 2D effect, 3D effects will be very lengthy. We need to write it again and again, the same effect. Then generally in CSS, you can see now in CSS, in general CSS background color, it will apply. For paragraph also it will apply. But previous, now in our original logic, you can see we have written a variable and we are accessing and using it. You can store anything in a variable. It can be a number, it can be a string, it can be a boolean. You can store. Suppose I want height width, I want to apply that. I want border, suppose I want border. Then dollar, some border effect. And it is like 2 pixel dotted, some black, something like this. I want that border effect here. Then you don't need to write it. Just access that border effect variable. And you can apply anywhere you want. Suppose after that, so you have some heading 1. For heading 1, I want a border. And I can access that border effect. And suppose we have heading 1. Heading 1. So SAS. So the CSS preprocessor. Processor, something like this. And I compile it. And you can see that effect need to be displayed there. So we can reuse the effects. We can configure and reuse the effects. That is the advantage of working with SAS. This is only variables. Now we have to understand how conditions are used. how iterations are used. That means iterations. How functions are used. We have functions we call as mixins. Functions are used so that we can make it more better and more simplified. Our CSS can be written in a more simple way. So, and it can be more effective in performance. But finally, everything need to be translated into CSS. So how to write conditions, iterations, functions, that we will see in the next session. Tomorrow we will discuss about that. And if you can know that, then you can write all the effects with this Sass. It's a very simple one. Only the point is, if you don't know JavaScript and come here, then you have to learn what is a variable, what is data type, what is operator, what is statements. Now you don't need to worry. Simply you can implement this and you can write the effects. So how to write if, iterations, functions, we will see in the next session. Tomorrow we will discuss about that. Okay.